All right. So this is my autobiography for the culture of colonization and theater that I decided to talk about my thesis and the books I have chosen. This is the presentation for MAP 209 040 Decolonization of Arts. And yeah, let's dive right in. So going through this thesis, I wanted to really talk about how theater was encapsulated by colonization, and I also kind of like want to investigate how colonization was also impacted theater, or like how even theater impacted was by it, in different aspects. um so looking through the library, I kind of went on the website and searched keywords keywords like kind of like culture, colonization, gay theater, anything that would kind of like spark my mind into what I wanted to discuss or what I really wanted to investigate. And yeah, so these five books actually came up, and then also I went to an exhibition called Indian Theater. Um, and yeah, and then we'll be going through the bibliography. I also attached it the links to some of the websites, so you can feel free to look whenever you want. So yeah, so let's dive into our first book, the playbook, and then we'll be talking about kind of melodrama, queer theater, Spanish theater, and then the exhibition of Indian theater at the end. So my first book, The Playbook, which is a story of theater democracy and the making of cultural world by James Shapiro. I chose this book because I found it interesting because it was more. I found the title interesting because it was like democracy and making a culture war. And reading it, it expresses how theater has a relation with and creates a democratic political and cultural values and beliefs, or a view that was created in the U.S. Shapiro in his book, he kind of argues that theater has become, and is a political statement for national identities, in a new phase of like a cultural control. So basically, during like the Cold War and the everything like that, he also kind of argued that like theater played an important role in investigating and deepening those political values and standpoints. And really, like, theater was given a political standpoint for minorities. People that couldn't really be seen within, or like people who felt like they couldn't have a voice. And theater wasn't practicated by that. And it really, the book, the colonized the worldview that theater isn't just for entertainment but to also make political views and standpoints. And it was, and like, kind of argued that like theater was also kind of used for like propaganda to make more like one more democratic view, essentially. And the quote I chose here, "Can you hear their voices?" was a call for governmental support for farmer leave on appeal made directly on the screen production, with which the play ends. "These boys are the symbols of thousands of our people who are turning somewhere for leaders. Will it be to educate a minority? Can you hear their voices?" So essentially, he was basically talking about a specific play here. I can't remember. I had to go back. Anyways, but he was talking about a play, and he was talking about the phrase that really impacted the end of this play, and it really kind of just showed that this play in specific and the ending was voicing these voicing the people who are looking for a leader, but unfortunately they're just really in the dark. And I think it just shows like theater is not just for story, but to also show political views. So my second book I've chosen was the melodrama Unveiled, American Theater and Culture. Um, in this book, written by David Grimstead, it focuses on American melodrama. And if you don't know what American melodrama is, or melodrama in general, it's essentially drama, but it's way more over exaggerated. So if you're familiar with like a telenovela, or like even the Kim Kardashian reality TV show, it's basically like that. So like very over exaggerated, very over the top drama, very soap opera, if you will. But anyway, sorry, I'm getting off track. David Grimstead focuses on American melodrama, so melodrama in America, the plays during the 19th century, specifically in the 1800s to 1850. And he focuses on different types of theater of drama, but more so, really emphasizing the difference in melodrama. And he kind of like argues that it was like a gateway to a new world of audiences and clarity around their anxieties and democracy and ethnicity and like all of that stuff. So basically it was like almost like in this book he expresses how melodrama was like a new lens for the audience to see or like be like more clear on their fears of what was happening in that time. So like the understandings of slavery, the new colonization that was happening when the Europeans would come over to America. So then there was like more like populace at that time. Um, yeah, and he kind of just analyzes how melodrama and various plays and scripts and performances on that essentially and the theater world, how it kind of just reinforced the dominant Western ideologies and kind of put it into a new perspective, and what was focusing on that time and, the political and dominance of standards and all of that stuff. So, and the quote I chose here was, melodrama after melodrama required some sort of exotic setting. Dramatists left no corner of the globe unvisited. Clearly did not spell that right. In their search for new homes from old plots, and each managed to work into or often stick onto history, some impressive pageant, festivity, or great scenic catastrophe as climax. The fascination of seeing spectacles and stylisms on the stage seemed to change the very nature of drama. Critic after critic complained legitimate drama was dying because of the successive succession of beautiful scenery, striking effort, and spectacularly. So, really, what the quote was saying here was that basically melodrama did change the very nature in drama, because drama would just be more like the fascination of beautiful scenery, striking effort, spectacular pageantry, very like flamboyant, while melodrama excavated on the more extreme side and gave the viewers on what they weren't really expecting, and impacting and receiving a political message or meaning the play was portraying dramatically different to its viewers. So for my third and fourth books, queer theater. So in these books, I will like kind of like the queer theater and the effects it has on us. So I did chose two books, Something for the Boys, Musical Theater and Gay Culture by John Clum, and then The Queerest Heart, Essays on Lesbian and Gay Theater. Both books do focus on queer art and theater and representation they are given in theater within the LGBTQ2 community. More focused on the representation and connection in theater, specifically the musical theater, and always have the musical theater that John May Clum discusses with his book Something for the Boys. It's a more focused and representation of connection that theater, and specifically musical theater, has shaped and a lot of ways provided a safe space for gay identity and gender expression. And and then the difference with the Queer Start, it was actually a collection of essays by different authors, scholars that engaged within the community, and and then written about it. So very similar books about, finding, the identity and like how gay culture has impacted musical theater in general, giving community. But but John McClung kind of like written about like different like plays of his and his experience, and then this book was actually multiple people and then their experiences as well. So basically, first point of view, multiple sides. But I find that there was a very much again, like a common ground that both books also emphasize theater of being a safe space for queer people and also influenced gay artists has on their their impact of the colonizing the Western view that you basically have to be straight or a man's man, or the classic homestead view of a woman. um but their expression is that they can be viewed as who they want to express themselves as, no judgments, and theater empowered them to be so, and be who they are, and then be very impacted by theater. um and a quote that I actually chose from this book in specific was American musical theater and celebrating its gayness, who have thought that in turn of the 21st century American opera, celebrating gay artists and heroes, would be a Sunday that the musical comedy, our own art form, would be represented by rivals in classics as musicals. So far much an openly gay musical theater is gay, and name only as many gay men fear the camp dragon flamboyance of the gay men who are invested in musical theater. So it was like almost like he was kind of discussing that in this quote that John McClung was very much trying to focus that musical theater was actually a gateway for gay men to be themselves, and the gay men that were actually hiding were kind of like were almost like scared of the men who were openly gay because they had no fear, and during that time, it wasn't taboo, but it was just very, a lot of hate towards the gay community, a lot of judgments, and he kind of expresses, the gay people who were in musical theater were more openly gay, and they did not care what the world thought. They did not care anything about it. And then the people who weren't in musical theater that were gay were like, very jealous and, very judgmental that they also wanted to incorporate that same power, that same basically essentially the courage, that musical theater has provided these other people. And then the queerness to art. I chose a quote. It was specifically from the chapter 7 passage, from which was an essay on the invincible ridiculous, or the emergence of out theater as an aesthetic, essentially. Um, they had a budget and they had a theater. I was in a place with lesbians who were seeing theater both as aesthetic expression and as a way of creating a lesbian culture. So essentially, from this person, she wrote that when she was experiencing her surroundings, she saw that not only did this theater company that the lesbians were doing, they weren't doing as like a theater expression to tell a story, but also to create a culture of their own, and like a safe space, and a very much a like a almost a festivity, for them to be themselves as well. So it was very, yeah, it was very much culture. It was very much a cultural appeal into a new worldview. So for my final book, I have chosen a history of theater in Spain. That was kind of like written and edited by Mirandego and David Diaz. Um, I thought this would be an interesting book to read because as the other books I did focus on was more North American and more political view. I wanted to also focus on a theater, in another culture, in another continent, and so I picked up a history of theater in Spain, and sure enough, it was actually a very interesting book. The author reflects in this book, the author reflects different areas in Spanish theater and now in their modern day practice. And it expresses how Spanish theater has shaped and evolved throughout the years, by linguistics, political, and even religious views. So it was very reading the book, it was watching how the Spanish theater actually evolved during over the years through their political views during the democracy, monarchy, and also new linguistics that also approached, the Spanish culture. And yeah, and a quote that I found that I thought was really good to explain this was Theater was used in a number of ways in the process of conquest and colonization from 1530s. During this period, religious and secular plays were employed to maintain socialization among soldiers and settlers, thus to limit the cross-cultural transactions, hybridization. But at the same time, the social theatricalities that developed around religious festivals imported from Europe, which were often deliberately linked to pre-existing festivities, led to the incorporation of both local forms and increasing local forms brought by African slaves and libertos, so freed slaves. Just reading this quote, it just gives some more definition that the colonization and what was actually going on also with Africa, developed their theater and their understanding and the really the an act of also socialization and democracy, and the religious beliefs and their understanding of other cultures. And I thought that that was, oh no, sorry, that was very interesting. Um, Anyways, so I know this isn't a book. I know for a bibliography, you probably have to do books. But I actually did want to focus on this exhibition because I thought this exhibition, really fit into my thesis and, the understanding. Um, yeah, the exhibition was a uh, installation in the Mackenzie Art Gallery. Now, I felt really stupid because I actually didn't really take pictures of the artwork, or I didn't take any pictures of the performances or anything like that. So I kind of just found this one photo off the internet, kind of just show. This actually was this bunny actually was the one of the installations in Indian theater, and it was actually filled with tobacco and all of that stuff. But anyways, sorry, I'm just getting off topic here. Anyways, during my time when I was visiting the opening ceremony and within the exhibition theater, I found that uh in my experience and also looking at other artists, it speaks voice into Indigenous theater art and traditions. I found that this exhibition not only consisted of video performances, and what I mean by video performances, I mean of video performances of actual uh, theater artists who were Indigenous, and it showed and talked about Spider Woman theater, which was a very, I found, it was a very interesting, woman-led, indigenous, theater group company, and it was, very inspiring to empower women. Anyways, but the exhibition also included, different styles of art, from mask making, music, sculpted works, beaded works, I'm pretty sure there was, and, lots of paintings. Um, I found that this exhibition didn't just explore the performance aspect, but rather it explored Indian theater as their way of telling stories, leaving a mark onto you after you leave. So, I guess in a sense, the exhibition followed, by the exhibition that followed, that was by Indian theater represents our worldviews being different from colonization through the sculptures, the words, the music, and the voice. The whole exhibition of Indian theater reflects the colonialistic view that theater isn't really just about a stage play, but it also reflects the interests and our difference and identity, and what makes us a person, and one's spiritual self. And the exhibition is what we would think was traditional, Western views would think is traditional. I found it was actually just it was more powerful in sharing the culture and story through drama and also various types of art, which I believe this exhibition should be shared and recognized because of this. So, concluding, my presentation and my research and all my findings, um, I found, in colonization, colonized theater was, it's, I feel like theater is actually a practice into colonization our worldviews. I find that theater isn't just for entertainment like we would think it would be, or like how theater has evolved, or like how the or like how even like famous playwrights like Shakespeare that we like study in high school and school, and how their effects on theater was, and like how we're so used to growing up in this Western view that theater is just for entertainment, theater is just for expression. But I feel like in reading, in my readings and my research, theater is a lot more than that. Theater is used to show stories and expression, and it's also to show political standpoints, as well as I find it, theater is like also like a battleground for minorities to fight back and become a majority in what our new views are with colonization and decolonization. So essentially, I found that theater has been shaped by colonization in different aspects, but I find that it's also shaping in how we decolonize and recolonize our own culture and identities. So yeah, thank you for listening to my autobiography. Here's my bibliography. If you are interested in the Indian standard for porn still determination, I put in the link, so you are welcome to check out the articles, or even just feel free to check out the exhibit. All right, thank you so much.